So, I know this might sound like something straight out of a movie, but it's actually a real story. I'm not sure if I should even be sharing this, but I've got to get it off my chest. It all started around 6 months ago when a few of us from the office were talking about unconventional parties. You know, those you won't believe what happened kind of events. I never really thought much of it, until the conversation shifted to something much more out there. We were talking to a couple of guys, and they started talking about a special kind of gathering they were planning. I didn't think much of it at first, but then they mentioned the location, a hospital. First I thought I misheard them. I mean, what could possibly happen at a hospital that's anything like a party? Maybe some kind of Halloween event or charity. But no, it wasn't any of that. We're throwing an event at the hospital, Dan said casually, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Wait, what? I blinked, not understanding. It's a private party, Mike added. A bunch of us go there for, well, a different kind of fun. It's not what you think, I promise. It's just a way for some open-minded people to let go of the usual rules, you know? I didn't know what he was getting at, but there was something in his tone that suggested this wasn't just any regular get-together. I glanced at Dan for confirmation. His grin widened, like he knew exactly what kind of reaction he was getting. I laughed nervously. So, you guys are saying you're having a party in a hospital? Like, what exactly happens at this hospital party? Dan just shrugged. You'll see if you come. It's a unique experience. No pressure to do anything, but it's definitely different from the usual parties you go to. The more they talked, the more confused I became. But here's the thing. I've always been someone who is a little curious about new experiences. And the idea of a party in a hospital, that was just so bizarre I couldn't stop thinking about it. But why a hospital? That was the thing I couldn't wrap my head around. I mean, hospitals were places for recovery, for healing, not places for whatever kind of thing they were talking about. Then Mike leaned in and said something that really threw me for a loop. It's a special kind of party, he said with a smile. A place where everyone is free to be themselves, with no judgment. It's kind of a swinger thing. But don't worry, it's all very chill. You just need to be comfortable and open to new things. At that moment I felt my stomach do a flip. Was he serious? A swinger party in a hospital? I couldn't believe my ears. The whole thing felt like some strange, twisted joke. Are you sure? This sounds insane, I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Believe me, it's safe. Everyone there is respectful of boundaries, Dan reassured me. The hospital is a private place we rent out. It's more about people coming together to explore new experiences. In a really relaxed, non-judgmental way. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. I mean, the more they talked about it, the more I was caught between shock and curiosity. A hospital didn't exactly scream party venue, but the idea of doing something that was completely out of the ordinary, well, it kind of intrigued me. I went home that night and couldn't stop thinking about it. I told myself that I was being silly, that there was no way I was actually considering this. But then I thought about it some more. What if I did go? What if I just showed up, checked things out, and decided if it was something I could handle? The more I thought about it, the more the idea began to feel like something I needed to do. It wasn't like I had to participate in anything I wasn't comfortable with. But the idea of being in a hospital, surrounded by people who were all there to explore new things. It felt like a completely different world. Something so out of my usual routine that it felt like the perfect escape. But of course there were so many questions. What kind of people were attending? Was it really as casual as they made it sound? Would I be judged if I didn't want to go along with whatever they were doing? I was in over my head. But one thing was clear. I had to make a decision. The party was coming up, and I couldn't back out without knowing more. The night before the party I sat there staring at my phone. I had gone back and forth so many times in my head, weighing the pros and cons of attending this event. Every time I thought I had made my decision, I'd talk myself out of it again. The invitation had seemed innocent enough. Dan had been persistent in a way that made me second-guess everything. It's all just for fun, no pressure. We just want everyone to be comfortable, he kept saying. But there was something about the whole idea that still felt off. A hospital. A place of healing. Why there? Why now? Why did I feel like this was so different from anything I had ever done before? I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, trying to calm my nerves. The truth was, I didn't really know why I was still considering it. Maybe it was just the thought of doing something out of the ordinary. I had always been someone who played by the rules, kept to my routine, my comfort zone. But then, here was this opportunity to break free from all of that. It felt freeing in a way. By morning I had made my decision. I sent a message to Dan. It was a simple, straightforward text. I'll come by, but just to observe. I'm not sure I'm ready to fully participate in whatever you guys have planned. His reply came almost instantly. Totally get it. Just come, enjoy the atmosphere. It's not about forcing anyone into anything. You'll have a good time, I promise. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I was in too deep now. I needed to see for myself what this was all about. That evening, I found myself standing in front of the hospital's main entrance, feeling like a fish out of water. I had expected the place to be stark and clinical, like a typical hospital. But this was different. The lighting was softer, more welcoming. The main lobby was quieter than usual, almost serene, but there was an energy in the air that I couldn't quite place. I checked the address again, confirming that I was at the right place. Sure enough, there was Dan standing by the entrance, grinning like he knew exactly how out of place I felt. "You made it," he said, his voice almost too chipper. He looked completely at ease, as if this was just another regular gathering. I forced a smile, trying to calm my nerves. Yeah, here I am. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all. The whole point is to make everyone feel comfortable, no matter what they're looking for. Come on, let me show you around. I followed him down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. Felt surreal. This was a hospital, yet it didn't feel like one at all. There was no sterile smell in the air, no rush of doctors and nurses. Instead, there were other guests, dressed in casual, comfortable clothes, laughing and chatting, as if they were at a regular gathering. It almost felt normal. The more we walked, the more I began to notice small, subtle touches that made this event feel different. There were rooms off to the side, each with softly glowing lights spilling out into the hall. A few of the rooms had open doors, and I could see people talking and lounging inside, but nothing overtly strange or out of place. It was all so mellow, I guess. Then we reached the main area, an expansive space that looked like it had been specially designed for social gatherings. There was a bar at one end, offering soft drinks and cocktails, and a small lounge area with plush chairs scattered around. The vibe was relaxed, like people had gathered here just to chat, to connect, to be themselves. I started to feel more at ease, but a nagging doubt was still with me. Why had they chosen a hospital? And why did this all feel like it was leading to something more? What exactly were they expecting? Dan seemed to sense my hesitance and leaned in a little closer, his voice dropping to a softer tone. "No one's going to pressure you. Just take it all in and see if it's your thing. You can leave whenever you want." The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I was already invested in this. I was standing there, surrounded by people I didn't really know, in a place I didn't fully understand, and yet, part of me felt oddly curious. I stayed by the bar for a while, watching the crowd. There were people of all different ages, but they all shared this calm, easygoing vibe. No one was acting out of control, no one was trying too hard. It was like a slow-paced party where everyone had their own agenda. Some were chatting quietly, others were more interested in mingling in small groups. The whole place felt relaxed. Then something happened that I didn't expect. Someone came up to me. She was a woman around my age, maybe a little older, dressed casually in a loose sweater and jeans. She had this warm smile, the kind of smile that made me feel instantly comfortable. "You new here?" she asked, her tone friendly, no judgment. I nodded, feeling a little embarrassed. "Yeah, I'm just here to check things out." She gave me a knowing look. "It's always a little overwhelming the first time. But don't worry, everyone here is super respectful. You can take your time, just enjoy the night." Her words calmed me. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt like maybe this wasn't so strange after all. It wasn't about pressure or doing something I wasn't comfortable with. It was about people finding a space where they could be themselves, no expectations. But even as I started to relax, I couldn't shake that little voice in the back of my head. What was going to happen next? And was I really ready for whatever came after this? I don't even know where things started to go wrong. I really don't. First it felt easy. I mean, I had told myself I was just here to observe, right? Just to see what this hospital party was about. But the moment I stepped into that main area and looked around, something shifted. The atmosphere was strange. It wasn't like the other parties I had been to. There were no loud music, no flashing lights, no chaos. Instead, it was almost too calm, too controlled. It almost felt like a weird dream. Everything seemed so normal at first, but deep down I had a nagging feeling that this wasn't where I was meant to be. As the night went on, I tried to stay back, mingling with a few people and trying to avoid standing out. But somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't the people. Most were friendly, easygoing, but I could tell that there was an undertone to everything, something that didn't feel right. After a while, Dan came over and pulled me into one of the quieter rooms. He was being overly polite, too casual for my liking. "You're doing great, just relax," he said, his voice a little too soft. "Relax?" I asked, not sure how to feel about that. "I'm just observing. That's all." "Yeah, of course. But if you wanted to do more, you'd be welcome. There's no pressure at all." He leaned in closer, his eyes searching mine. There was a sincerity in his voice, but something in his eyes made my skin crawl. No pressure. Didn't feel like that. I pulled away slightly, feeling suddenly very aware of how close he was. "I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this," I muttered. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to, I swear. Just think about it, okay? We're here to have fun. Just be yourself." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But it was hard to ignore the quiet whispers I heard from other rooms, the subtle glances people exchanged, like they were waiting for something more. It wasn't about fun anymore. Felt like an unspoken pressure. I stood there, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. Another part of me felt trapped, like if I didn't go along with it, I'd stick out in a way I didn't want to. Then things took a sharp turn. One of the women I had met earlier, the one who had been so friendly, approached me again. This time there was a different energy about her. "Hey, you're looking a little tense. It's okay. You can join us if you want to. We're just here to enjoy the night. No expectations." She gestured toward a group of people gathered in one of the rooms. I had no idea what they were doing, but the looks on their faces told me it was something far from casual. There was a weight to the air that felt almost suffocating. I was already on edge, but this moment, it made my skin crawl. I shook my head, stepping back. "I don't think I can do this. I don't feel right about it." The woman's smile faltered for a moment before she quickly recovered. "No one's forcing you. But don't be too quick to judge. You might find it more freeing than you think." I turned and walked away, but the atmosphere of the place had shifted in my mind. It wasn't fun anymore. Felt like there were too many expectations. Like I was the only one who didn't understand the unspoken rules. I retreated to a quiet corner, trying to calm myself. I was feeling overwhelmed, but I couldn't just leave. I didn't want to make a scene. I was too embarrassed. And then it happened. Someone came up behind me. Someone I didn't know well. They were too close. Before I knew it, they were touching my arm, asking if I wanted to join them in one of the rooms. It was too much. My heart was racing, my palms were sweaty, and I felt the air thickening around me. It wasn't casual anymore. It wasn't the easygoing atmosphere I had walked into earlier. My mind raced. This wasn't what I had signed up for. This wasn't just for fun. This was uncomfortable, and I was scared. I felt cornered, like I was being pushed into something I wasn't ready for. I pulled away sharply. "Whoa, hey. I can't do this," I stammered, my voice shaking. The person didn't take it well. They shot me a look that was a mix of confusion and disappointment, like I was the problem. "Maybe you should leave then," they said, their tone colder than before. I was crushed. I had tried to stay calm, to respect everyone's boundaries, but here I was, feeling like an outsider. My heart was pounding and my head was spinning. I couldn't breathe properly. Before I knew it, Dan came up to me, sensing the tension. "You okay?" he asked, but I could see the look in his eyes. He wasn't really concerned. He just wanted me to stay. "I can't do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to leave." He didn't argue. Instead, he just nodded. "If that's what you want. But don't make a scene. It's not that serious." His words stung. It wasn't that serious. It was to me. I felt like I had just been thrown into something I didn't want, something that made me feel unsafe. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how wrong this whole night had gone. I made my way out of the main area, feeling like the eyes of everyone were on me. As I stepped into the hallway, I was stopped by someone I didn't recognize, a hospital security staff member. "Sorry, you need to leave," they said, their voice calm but firm. Why?" I was stunned. "It's policy. You've been flagged. We're asking you to leave the premises." Flagged. I didn't understand. It hit me then. Dan and his friends must have decided that I wasn't right for their party. I had violated some unwritten rule. And now I was being kicked out. Publicly. It was humiliating. I can still feel the weight of that night pressing on me. Even after all this time, I can't escape the images in my mind. The way I felt trapped, the way I was pushed into something that never should have happened. I made it out of the hospital that night, but not without the heavy weight of humiliation on my shoulders. I didn't know what had gone wrong. The place had seemed harmless at first, but somewhere along the way, everything had shifted into something I wasn't prepared for. I walked out into the cool night air, feeling the burn of tears I refused to let fall. But when I got in the car, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Broke down. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, and the tears came hard. I had never felt so foolish in my life. I wasn't crying because of what had happened to me. I was crying because I had ignored my own instincts. I had let my curiosity and need to break out of my comfort zone cloud my judgment. I had been desperate to fit in, to experience something different. And in doing so, I had compromised myself. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became at myself. I had let them convince me that it was just for fun, that there was no pressure. But in reality, everything about that night had been about pressure. Pressure to fit in. Pressure to be something I wasn't. And the worst part, the hospital, the place of healing, hadn't been a place for healing that night. It had been a place for exploitation. A place where boundaries didn't matter. Where comfort didn't matter. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror after that. It wasn't just the event itself. It was the realization that I had let myself fall into a trap I never should have walked into. The worst part wasn't the incident with the security guard. It wasn't the awkward glances or the way people had looked at me when I tried to leave. It was the fact that the very people who had invited me, who seemed so welcoming at first, had turned cold the moment I showed that I wasn't interested in what they were offering. The moment I stepped out of line, I became a problem. And they made sure I knew it. When I finally got home that night, I found a message on my phone from Dan. I didn't even bother opening it. I knew exactly what it was. A generic message, apologizing for the misunderstanding, but making it clear that I was the one who had ruined the experience. That I had been the one who didn't understand the rules. And that I had made it uncomfortable for everyone else. I deleted the message without replying. I didn't need to hear it. What I needed was time to heal. Time to reflect. Time to make sure I never made that mistake again. The next day, I got a notification from the hospital. I was shocked to see that they had added my name to some kind of blacklist. I had been banned from attending any future events at the hospital. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but when I called to ask about it, they confirmed it. Apparently, my disruption had been noted, and I was no longer welcome. I felt a strange mix of relief and disgust. On one hand, I was glad that I wouldn't be involved in something like that again. On the other, I felt even more humiliated. The very place I had thought would be a safe space had turned its back on me when I didn't conform. I couldn't help but feel like it was my fault for putting myself in that situation in the first place. As time went on, I slowly began to regain my confidence. I distanced myself from the people who had invited me to that event, and I began to focus on what really mattered to me. Realizing that I had made a huge mistake didn't come easily, but I knew I had to learn from it. If there's anything I can say to anyone reading this, it's this: don't ever let curiosity or peer pressure push you into something you're not ready for. I know we all want to experience new things to push ourselves out of our comfort zones, but there's a line. You don't owe anyone anything, especially not when it comes to your boundaries and your well-being. I wish I could go back and tell myself to walk away the moment I felt uneasy, to trust my gut. But that's not how life works. The important thing is learning from it and making sure it never happens again. I'll never recommend going to an event like that. Not in a hospital, not anywhere. I don't care how casual they say it is. It wasn't worth it. It was the worst decision I've ever made, and I'll carry the lessons from it for the rest of my life. So, please, if you're ever in a situation where you're being invited to something that makes you uncomfortable, trust yourself. You don't need to fit into anyone's mold. You're enough just the way you are.